Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison. I want to welcome you to this session of Humanity Rising as we convene our fourth of 5 sessions on intuitive interspecies communication. As we open today, I want to just take a few minutes and pay tribute to Jane Goodall, who arguably is the godmother of all animal communication and interspecies communication, given the historic nature of her work. As many of you know, she turned 90 years old last month on April 3rd. I've had the privilege, along with Claire and others, of knowing her for many, many years since our Gorbachev days. I met her first in San Francisco in 1995, and we've been good friends since. She's been on Humanity Rising twice, I think it is, since we have been broadcasting our programs. And today I just wanted to thank Jane for everything that she's done on behalf of the animals and equally fundamentally on behalf of humanity, with the constant call, which we've heard for this week and many times in Humanity Rising, that it's humanity's ability now to return to nature in an intentional, synergistic, humble way. That is really the key to the redemption we seek as we teeter on the brink of the precipice of self-destruction. Jane was born in 1934 in London, in Hampstead. One of the things that her father gave her when she was just a little baby that she grew up with was, instead of giving her a teddy bear, he gave her a chimpanzee. And several of the neighbors were scandalized. They said, "You give this little girl a monkey, and she's liable to have nightmares and develop personality disorders, etc." But he persisted, and Jane loved it, grew up loving animals. And then when she was 22 years old, single woman, 22, she went to Africa. She went to Kenya at the suggestion of a friend. And she first became a secretary there. She wanted to visit the animals in Kenya. She heard about Richard Leakey, the great primatologist and archaeologist that had been doing that seminal work, as you all know, in the Olduvai Gorge in Kenya and Tanzania, where the earliest remains of our species, Homo sapiens, have been found. And it was Richard Leakey and his wife, Mary, that were the primary researchers. So one day she thought she would just call Dr. Leakey and see if she could just come by and talk to him about animals. And he took one look at Jane and realized that she was the one he'd been looking for, because he was on the search for someone to begin field studies with the chimpanzees, because his assertion was that as humanity emerged from the upper primates, that the chimpanzees were our closest relatives, in effect. And he wanted to find somebody who could start researching the chimpanzees to find out everything that they possibly could find out. So with the approval of his wife, Mary, he approached Jane, and would she be potentially interested? And she says, "Are you kidding me?" Absolutely. So they began to work together at the Olduvai Gorge. But very quickly, he realized that if she was going to do proper research, she needed to study primate animal behavior. So she was sent back to London, where she studied primate behavior, such as it was known at that time, came back, went immediately in 1960 to Gombe in northern Tanzania, where she spent the better part of the next 60 years observing the chimpanzees. She took a break back in after about 5 years in 1962, I believe it was, and Richard raised the money again to send her to Cambridge to do a PhD. She shows up in Cambridge. She had no bachelor degree. She had no academic degree other than a certificate from high school. So it turns out, historically, since Cambridge is around for a very, very long time, it's my alma mater, actually, where I took my PhD as well. Jane was the 8th person to be admitted into the PhD program from Newnham College at Cambridge University. And she astonished her professors with her knowledge, because she'd been out there. She was the first person ever that we know of to go into the jungles and observe the chimpanzees literally 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And she had given them all names: Old Graybeard and others, that Frodo was one of them. Goliath was another one of them, Lucy, etc. And they said she couldn't do it, and she insisted that she could. They finally relented. She got her PhD, and then back she went to the Gombe National Preserve and began deeper and deeper study of the chimpanzees. Her findings were revolutionary. Up to that point, you thought of a lion as just sort of a lion, something you saw in a picture book, without kind of personality, without volition. They were referred to as it, not even he and she, purely 100% instinctively driven. And you may recall, those of you who are a little bit older, in the 1960s, the revolutionary finding of Jane Goodall that the chimpanzees use tools. And at first, she was criticized and said, this is nonsense. It's not possible. These animals are not capable of cognitive thought. Then they took videos of these chimpanzees breaking off little sticks and sharpening them, and then poking them down into these termite hives and so forth, and picking out the termites one at a time and putting it in their mouths. And that was the first time we humans, in the arrogance of our civilization, had to come to grips with the reality that these dumb monkeys were actually pretty smart. She also began to reveal that, like humans, chimpanzees have personalities: introverts, extroverts, alpha males, alpha females, beta, omega, pecking orders, and so forth and so on. And they not only are not fully instinctively driven, they show an extraordinary amount of free will. Because just like we humans, the lazy ones don't do much work. The extroverted ones tend to dominate. The introverted ones tend to that the same spectrum of personalities pertain to chimpanzees. And as we know, they pertain to all the animals, including the beehive. You think of the beehive as just this monolithic hive. and they have lazy bees and happy bees and sad bees and overachievers, and all the things that we humans have, all the other species have, as it turns out. She also discovered that the chimpanzees were not vegetarians. The stereotype at that time was that chimpanzees looked around for bananas and other fruits that they could eat. And that was sort of the stereotype of the chimpanzees, is peeling the banana, right? And she began to realize, as her research carried on into years, and she was more and more accepted, that the chimpanzees are not only meat eaters, they can be extraordinarily aggressive, and in fact engage in organized violence against other chimpanzees and other monkeys, and in fact even engage in cannibalism. Sometimes the chimpanzee alpha females will actually kill the children of other females to subordinate them in the clan. And so she also revealed that, like we humans, there's light and dark dimensions. I believe Jane has the distinction. There may be one or two other people that I don't know about, but she became so deeply immersed in the jungle and the chimpanzees that they integrated her for 22 months. She essentially stayed with them as part of the tribe. And interestingly, this, PhD from Cambridge, by then, a world icon. Jane Goodall is the most recognized woman in the world and has been for decades. There's no other woman anywhere in the world that even comes close to name recognition globally than Jane Goodall. For 22 months, she was accepted into the chimpanzee tribe, and she was the lowest of the females. She was number 22 in the females, which gives you a sense of where we humans need to begin when we fully integrate ourselves into the greater web of life. We need to go from the apex species to the omega species and humble ourselves and enter into the web of life that way. She's been tireless. It's been an extraordinary, prolific writer. I think some 20, 30, 40 books. I think about a dozen children's books alone. She founded in the 1980s the Jane Goodall Institute. And then in 1991, she founded Roots and Shoots for young people all over the world to engage in environmental concerns. She's been knighted. She was a baroness for a while, and now she got another knighthood. And so now she's Dom, Jane Goodall. So as we begin our program, I just want to honor Jane, because as Bernard of Clairvaux said, over 1,000 years ago, we are mere dwarfs standing on the shoulders of giants. And we've been talking to some giants this week, real pioneers. And they would be the first to say that they are mere dwarfs, standing on the shoulders of giants gone past. Although in Jane's case, age 90, she's still traveling about 300 days a year. She's relentlessly exuberant and optimistic about the prospects of the human race if we would only re-enter the web of life. So thank you, everyone, for joining Humanity Rising in this session of intuitive interspecies communication. And without further ado, I would love to welcome Winter Wursthorn, our convener, to the program, and she will introduce our primary speaker for today. And then I'll circle back, as I always do, toward the end. Thank you, Winter.
Thank you so much, Jim, for that amazing tribute to Jane Goodall. And what she always gives to me, she always spreads that message of hope and a continual. And she's seen so much in her life, but she's still always saying, there is hope. Don't give up hope. And part of today's presentation or talk discussion with Christine is about how this movement of interspecies communication is spreading and into all the various avenues of life. So I'd really love to welcome Christine Noble-Seller. Welcome, Christine.
Hello,
Thank
Winter.
Thank you so much for being here with us today. Now, Christine, you and I met, I think, well, we've never met in person, but virtually. We met on one of the very first virtual Starline journey, perhaps even before that, so about 5 years ago. And just, I'd love you to tell everyone your journey into interspecies communication, because I know you've done the consulting and the teaching, and you've written some books, you've created some wisdom card decks, and now you're focusing on advocacy and sacred activism. So I'm going to hand over to you to explain how it all fits together.
Thank you, Winter. Hello, everyone from Canada. I'd like to introduce my friend and family member and colleague. Some of you may be able to see him, Oliver. Some of you have met him in the after chat this week. Yeah, I would love to continue with the messages of hope today with our talk. And I'd be happy to start with our journey. It was actually your husband that introduced us. He saw something that I posted on Facebook and arranged for a meeting for us to meet. And the day that we were supposed to meet on Zoom, I couldn't connect. And then I got a message saying that you had just lost one of your beloved feline family members. So it was postponed. And that's how we connected. And as you said, it's been 5 years. So like many people here, I suspect I've been a nature and animal lover for my whole life. I grew up moving around the world. I had a lot of change and uncertainty. I was a shy, introverted child, and change was difficult. And the one constant were our family cats, as well as spending time out in the garden and in nature. So the journey really picked up in 2011. I joined an online presentation. It was an animal communicator, and she took us through a communication with animals. And some animals from my childhood had stepped forward. I remembered them, and they told me that this was my life's mission and that it was time to get to work. So I studied for 4 years with Sue Becker, who is a Canadian and international communicator, and she studied under Penelope Smith, who many people will know. And yes, you're right. I did start with private consultations supporting families with their animal family members, but I also started right away with talks, letting people know about IIC, because after being immersed in it for 4 years, I just wanted the whole world to know about it. I thought it was the most incredible, amazing thing. And consultations just deepened my understanding of all species, including the humans, because the humans were reaching out for help with their animal family members, but so often it was the humans that also needed assistance. And then you're right, it developed more into teaching of supporting others to do this work, to empower them. And I also have a background in advocacy and special events management, so I started to offer events. And then when I came to learn about you and your work and the work of Linda Tucker and the White Lions, and attend the global prayers in 2018, and then do heart work and virtual star lion journeys and become a founding member of the Heart Pride, I learned about sacred activism, and I started asking nature for guidance around how I could help, how I could advocate. And it started with a program called Love in Action. And basically, an animal species would step forward. We spoke to tigers, we spoke to giraffes, and we learned about them, their habitat, their challenges, their messages, and sent them support through the heart work. And then in the last few years, I'm at the point actually where I'm delighted to share that last month I received funding for 6 months to exclusively focus on IIC advocacy for and with nature. So I'll be sharing a lot of those projects later today, because as you mentioned earlier, it's an incredible time in this field and there are unlimited possibilities.
Mm. Thank you. Thanks, Christine. And now, can you, there's been a history of activism and for animals, animal rights. What is can you explain about the advocacy for nature and the activism, the sacred activism? Can you just sort of speak a little bit about the differences now and how that's shifting?
Sure. Well, I'd like to share because for me, it was a journey of understanding what they all mean and how they can work individually and how they can work collectively. So the traditional model for nature advocacy is that humans advocate on behalf of nature because we're not necessarily aware of IIC, so we don't consult the primary stakeholder. And so humans are really good at projecting our own species perspective onto nature and other animals. So IIC allows us to directly communicate, collaborate, and co-create with nature and all of her beings. And that is a shift, a huge paradigm shift. We're shifting from advocating for nature to advocating for and with nature with IIC. So in terms of advocacy, because for me, I've often used advocacy and activism as interchangeable terms, but I learned that they're different. So advocacy is speaking on behalf of a group or an individual or a cause, and it's concerned with raising awareness and educating the public and lobbying for change within policy. I think I use them interchangeably because I found out I was doing both. And activism is working towards societal and legislative change. And it's often at a grassroots level, which I'm sure a lot of people here who are watching can identify. And it's concerned with promoting social justice and bringing about systemic change. And then sacred activism, as I mentioned, I learned about through Andrew Harvey and through you, Winter, and through Linda Tucker. And for me, my understanding that I share with people is that it is focusing our energy on creating the world that we want to see. And it comes from a place of unconditional love, whereas traditional activism is fighting against something, and it's often done with the energy of fear, rage. It is a very different frequency. And the other thing that's important to mention about sacred activism is the power of intention that's involved, that it's an energetic practice, that we follow suit of what nature and other animals do to use energetic practices to envision positive change and to bring that forward into the world, into a 3D from the quantum world.
Mm. And can you give us some examples of how this is now shifting? Because, we still have activists, we still have everyone waving banners and shouting out and getting angry. But it's still quite new, the whole sacred activism. How do we show that? How do we get that out there?
It's definitely changing. In terms of being in this field, I've been in this field professionally for 10 years, and I've spoken to many colleagues. And the field of IIC has been one that has been met with skepticism, has been dismissed. It's even been mocked. Um, and IIC practitioners have continued to advocate and continue to educate. And we are seeing a shift, and it is a quantum shift. It is a quantum leap. We're really seeing change. As recently as last year, my experience with myself and colleagues is that so often IIC collaborations with animals and care, with wildlife and with nature are done in confidence. They're done outside of the eye of the public because these organizations are concerned about what the public is going to think, and that there's going to be fallout and there's going to be consequences and people are going to lose funding, and perhaps that the animals in care are going to suffer worse consequences and receive less care than they are now. But what's shifting are things like this week, your partnership with Ubiquity University, the world's first postgraduate degrees in IIC. And the other thing that's happening that I'm experiencing, as are my colleagues, is that organizations are approaching us to collaborate. And I have some examples of those that I would like to share. And one of them that I'd like to share, a very recent one, is the University of Edinburgh reached out to myself and my colleague Eleni Gikakis of Interspecies Peace, who's your guest tomorrow. And they prescribe nature for humans, for mental health. And they have the planetary lab and tiny habitats. And basically they want to work with us to bring IIC to their community to improve the mental health of humans.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. And I mean, I know so you're going to engage with that. You're going to start showing how nature can improve the health. I mean, people know that nature improves our health, but it's the specific of connecting with nature that they want you to show.
Yeah, and I think what's so important and that people will recognize is that we've become so disconnected from nature. We become falsely separated when there is no true separation. We've forgotten that we humans are an animal species. We've forgotten that we're part of nature. And we tend to live in a world that is human-centric, that is egocentric, where we're pillaging the earth. We see the earth and nature exclusively for human use. We don't look at a collaborative model. We don't look at an ecocentric model where we work together. And it's this remembrance that is going to make so much difference. Because we only need to look at what humans are doing to the planet to understand the degree of separation that we are suffering from.
And it is a sickness. It's a separation sickness. And so I remember when it was quite early on in my career, and I was asked to communicate with an animal that was in a sanctuary. It was a dog, a Labrador, that was waiting to be rehomed, and he was in a kennel, and this was from a distance, so I wasn't in the same country. I think I was in South Africa and the sanctuary was in the shelter rather than sanctuary. Shelter was in the UK, and they couldn't work out what was wrong with this dog. And it was always a last resort. It's always a last resort. Call in the animal communicator, and it still is to a certain extent. But I mean, just to share this amazing story, because I still it was one of my experiences where I could smell what the animal was smelling from a distance. I could smell something burning and smoke, and this was making him feel ill. And then they realized that his new kennel where he'd been moved was right near where they were burning rubbish. on a weekly or daily basis. So that was the smell that I was getting. But that, that was quite a rare occurrence 15, 16 years ago, maybe even 18 years ago. But now, you have had lots of experience working with shelters, and, you're giving animals a voice, and, tell us a little bit about your work there.
Yeah, sure. So one of the Love in Action or sacred activism initiatives that I ran last year was an animal communication practice group. And so basically that animal communicator students and professionals who wanted to communicate with animals in human care, so that might be cats or dogs, it might be wildlife, could come and speak to animals and speak to the organization founder who was caring for them to receive confirmation and validation of the messages that they were receiving from the animals. And the reason why it was sacred activism was because I donated my time, energy, and resources, and 100% of the proceeds went to our guest organization. So last year we spoke to 5 different guest organizations and raised over $2,000 for them as well. And the communications helped a shelter cat get adopted. It helped some dogs that were in palliative care let their person know, the founder, where they wanted the veterinarians to examine their body so that it was less of a guessing and testing game. We also worked with the big cats of Panthera Africa sanctuary. And what's unique about Panthera Africa is that they use IIC in rescuing, relocating, and caring for all their residents, and that all of their staff also learn or relearn, more accurately, IIC, to interact with the big cats in their care, and that the volunteers that come have the option to learn. So the reality is, when we involve these beings that we don't have a common spoken language with, we stop projecting, we stop guessing, we stop working from a place of good intentions, and we actually get useful, helpful information that we can't necessarily get from anywhere else, but animals in nature themselves. You mentioned giving animals voice. They are a nonprofit organization that was founded in 2021 to provide free IIC services to animals in care. I am a volunteer board member with them. And right now we're on our 3rd pilot project. And the idea is to bring IIC into dogs who are in care in the US, and we work with volunteer communicators who are Canada and the US. And the idea is that the data collected will show that IIC is a best practice. It's an enrichment activity. It increases adoption. It increases socialization rates. It decreases euthanization. It helps address health issues faster. It saves resources for the shelters. It helps shelter staff and volunteers better understand how to care for the animals. So there's so many win-wins with it. And the idea is that once we can show this, that this will spread to animals in care and wildlife and nature. Well, it's all nature everywhere, but we're starting in the US with dogs.
Yeah. Carry on. I could see you about.
I was just gonna, yeah. So right now, anybody who's watching or listening, we are actively recruiting shelters and rescues and sanctuaries that have dogs in their care. You can have other animals, but we're just focusing on demonstrating how IIC supports them. So they can contact me directly, or they can look up givinganimalsvoice.org, and they'll have information about the organization. So it's really groundbreaking because one of the things that they're doing in the United States with shelters is they're trying to use more remote services. And as you mentioned already, is your example is that IIC is not based on geography, and it can be offered anywhere easily, and it's extraordinarily accessible.
Mm. And I get thrilled to hear all the places that as I said yesterday, I think we no longer have to prove that this works, but there is quite a lot of research being done just to show how well it can be used. And there's platforms like the Multi-Species Symposium. It's getting accepted into places that I'd never have imagined. Can you share some of the other incredible shifts and movements that are
Absolutely
incorporating IIC, please?
I'd love to. You mentioned the Multi-Species Symposium on IIC multi-methods research, and that's out of Canada, out of the University of Saskatchewan. The academic lead is MJ Barrett, and that was hosted online in 2022 and last year in 2023. Last year, the symposium was 5 days long, and it's multidisciplinary because over 750 people who are veterinarians, academics, researchers, IIC professionals, artists, like every aspect you can think of, attended from over 45 countries. And it's the idea that we all come together to work towards a common goal, or we all understand it from our own sector. But IIC, what's unique about it is that the communication supports consultation with nature and the animals. It's inclusive because everybody's perspective is there. There's no us and them that's been spoken about this week. Let me just find my notes. I wrote it down. It's so clear. Sometimes there's so much going on my mind. It's just hard to think of exactly what I want to say. Saskia shared yesterday how IIC can be used with the invisible and the visible and the inner and outer landscapes. And we also talked about geography already. We talked about how it's multi-sectoral, that it's applicable in all circles, like the symposium. It's holistic, as we've mentioned, and that's what the symposium represented because the primary stakeholder, we had representation, if I recall, from fern and bear and a couple of other nature beings and animals at the symposium as well. They held space and seats. And the other reason why I love IIC and why it's so amazing, whether as a communication tool or advocacy, is that it's transformative. And there's a quote that I love that I believe is accredited to Credo Mutua, which is nature is magical and magic is nature. So there's one thing about the Multi-Species Symposium that I want to share as it connects to you, Winter. I reached out to MJ about something, and several of her graduate students are speaking at next month's World Biodiversity Forum in Davos, Switzerland. And you are the plenary speaker. Can you tell us about your topic and what you're talking about there?
Christine, thank you. I mean, that's, to me, that is the greatest shift when someone like me is invited to speak at a world forum on a scientific academic forum on biodiversity. So I've been asked to speak about how IIC could assist with biodiversity and protecting biodiversity. So, I'm still downloading a bit of my talk. So we will, just see what comes. Obviously, I've done the abstract and the outline, and it was accepted. But it was a complete honor to be invited. And in a forum like that, I don't think they've ever had a platform to represent alternative knowledge systems, which is what IIC is, so that's opened up there's so many more speakers on Indigenous knowledge systems, and, Dr. MJ Barrett and her PhD students talking about research that some of us have actually been involved in as well. So that's going to be fascinating. And yeah, I don't think I can say much more about it. I'm still, I still sometimes pinch myself and think, is this real? But it really is. And the world is changing in such an amazing way.
So it's so exciting to know that you're, as I said, a plenary speaker. It's so exciting to know that MJ's graduate students from the University of Saskatchewan are talking about it. But there is another presentation that I'm aware of because it involves you and your colleague Lynn Shannon, who invited myself and Eleni to co-author the presentation. Do you want to mention that?
Yeah, I can mention it, or you can speak about it as well because you're involved. But I'll briefly, it's a presentation that Lynn, who's a marine biologist at UCT, the University of Cape Town, we're doing a sort of study on how IIC can help ocean, basically, and help to conserve the ocean. So that's also fascinating. Do you want to speak into that, Christine, from your perspective?
So an invitation came from Lynn and Winter to Eleni and I saying, we are doing this presentation at the World Biodiversity Forum on ocean transformation with scientists and researchers, and we want to include IIC and the HEART method that Winter has spoken about, the HEART work, HEART energy achieving real transformation. So there's the communication with nature and holding the vision and supporting what we're hearing from. So there's Winter, Lynn, Eleni, and I gather weekly, and we speak to ocean and all of her beings to ask for guidance and to ask for what ocean and ocean's beings would like to see from humans, rather again than, us human advocates and scientists and researchers, deciding what is important and what priorities to follow and where to focus our work. This again is IIC advocacy for and with nature, in this case, ocean and her beings. And so we'll be gathering again in a few weeks to speak to the larger group, to inform everybody. And then Winter and Lynn will be collating this information to share at the World Biodiversity Forum. And my understanding is that it's meant to be a model within South Africa as a pilot, as case studies, and then based on its success, this can be replicated and used worldwide for ocean conservation, because as we know, so much of our world is covered by ocean. And there is a lot of, Lynn, who's on the project, who's the biologist, talks that there is a lot of work being done on water, fresh water, but less work being done on oceans. So I'm really excited to be collaborating and assisting you and Lynn with that.
And just to come back, I'm thinking about our water, how water holds memory and how important it is to actually work with the waters, whether it's fresh water or seawater, but the ocean holds such a huge part of our earth, or the earth holds such a huge part of our waters, our ocean waters, that it's actually fascinating, because also remember that Lynn was saying the reason why the ocean kind of gets ignored by most people, it's because everything is kind of under the waves. The damage is not in our face like it is when we're walking the earth and seeing the destruction of the forests and everything. So really, I'm really excited about that project. And there are people working with dolphins and whales, but it's also the little beings, as Saskia would say, in the invisible realms of the
Yeah,
ocean.
the bacteria, the
Uh,
organisms, the plankton, the plants, and ocean as an ecosystem is much more connected and aware of its interconnectedness than humans are with the larger ecosystem of nature, I think.
Christine, I'd love to ask you, you've been working with nature and with animals, and then how does it feel when you get that call to action? We're talking about a call to action, and you and I both, and everyone that's been on this week, and everyone who's doing really good work for the planet and for humanity and for, just for life, feels this call. What makes us answer that call? Am I putting you
Just
on the
like,
spot?
no, not at all. I think just like intuitive interspecies communication is intuitive, so are our callings, so are our inner nudges and nigglies, they come from the heart. And this life experience for me has been one where I've been shaped as an advocate my entire life, starting off in human advocacy, in education and health, employment, and then just transfer those skills into the larger domain of nature. And for me, it's not a martyr complex. It's not a save the world. I know Saskia talked about that, and she had suffered from that, and I definitely have had bouts of that too. I agree with that. Um, it just feels like what I was born to do, and it just feels like the most important thing that I could do. And when I engage with nature and all her beings, it is the most deeply loving, respectful, satisfying experience and relationship. Um, and I can't think of anything that's more important and more vital. And in fact, that's sort of what led me last year to give up my private practice. And really, all my events had a portion, as well as the sacred activist events, where money was, and awareness and education was going to showcase ethical animal wildlife sanctuaries and nature sanctuaries, and showcase IIC and showcase the difference it could make in the world, to what I shared earlier in today's talk about asking for support so that I can support all these projects, because so many of them, um, the services are provided pro bono. So this is something I'm also watching in IIC advocacy, is how to support the humans to do this work. And that leads me to another thing that I want to share. That's a kind of an exciting announcement. Something that arose out of a conversation that you and tomorrow's guest, Eleni Gikakis of Interspecies Peace, are creating. We talked about how important it is to make IIC transparent and accessible. It was based on the conversations we've touched on earlier, how it still can be sensitive and it can still be an area where people want to work in confidence. We want to make it more normalized. And we are in the process of creating 2 IIC activism and advocacy courses. One is going to be for IIC professionals, and one is going to be for people who are working in the field, that might be conservationists, veterinarians, advocates, people that are already working with nature and nature's beings, but want to integrate IIC into it. So you can follow us to find out when we are ready to launch this, because there, as we understand it, there isn't a course like this in the world yet, and it is very needed. And nature is here to support us with this work. And we've bonded, the 3 of us, in part because we share this mission, and we're not alone in sharing this mission.
Mm. I think there is going to be a lot of support, and it is so needed because so many people, they either don't believe that they can communicate with animals, like, we're saying it's innate in everyone, we can all do it. Practice, you need to practice and commit, but we can all do it. But some people just will say, I can't do it, I can't do it. But this is a way that people can start learning more about it, and supporting, even if they feel that they can't do it, supporting others, and this work in such a in such a special way in so many different fields. And it's about, what can you do? We're speaking to over 100 people live now, and it's what can you do? Because you're obviously all here to, because you believe in this, or you want to believe in it, and you're passionate about nature and animals and the environment. So what can we all do to assist this paradigm shift? And I think that's what you are passionate about, Christine, is helping people to help. Is
Yeah.
that, yeah.
It is absolutely. And I'd like to share some tips with people who are interested in this as to how they can do this, and a couple more of examples before we close with our big announcement of a new project, another new project. So, because so many of these things are happening and some of them are in development. So what I say to people is, if you want to help out, follow your curiosity, honor your intuition, those nudges, those dings, that inner wisdom. If you're looking for confirmation, ask nature. And if you're not sure how to support, again, ask nature what is needed and what can that look like. So those would be my very brief recommendations, is that you're not alone. You don't have to figure this out yourself. And again, IIC advocacy for and with nature is including nature, is not, again, us projecting, as I keep saying, onto nature. We need to collaborate and co-create together. And there's two upcoming projects. One is happening and one is under consideration that I wanted to share. The rights of nature are really important as well. And there is a global association called GARN, which stands for the Global Alliance of the Rights of Nature. And they have various hubs. They have an Indigenous Council and hubs in South Africa and North America and Europe and South America. And they have an academic hub, and they have a legal hub. And their youth hub reached out to me to ask, because they were looking for an Earth Day speaker. I wrote them, they found one, but they didn't know about IIC. And so I said, well, I'd love to bring Winter and Eleni on, my colleagues, because you're a global organization and we're on different continents, And so this fall, we are going to be collaborating with them on IIC and the rights of nature. And that brings a whole new dimension, because the rights of nature is primarily about securing legal rights and protections and less about the sentience of nature. And if we bring sentience of nature into any domain, including the rights of nature, that really shifts how humans' beliefs and perceptions and insights about nature. And more specific to animals, through IIC, I was guided to submit a panel submission to the Canadian Animal Law Conference, which is hosted annually by Animal Justice, which is Canada's only legal advocacy for animals. And you can have up to 4 speakers on the panel. I would be one of them. I would speak about what is IIC and why is it beneficial and how does it done. But my co-panelists would be farmed animals, animals in laboratories, wildlife, animals in entertainment, and companion animals. And basically, they would be giving a voice as to how IIC allows us to have a more inclusive legal system with animals. And I think I'd just like to wrap up with one last example that I found really, really powerful. it was actually a conversation between Linda Tucker, who you spoke to on Monday, and our colleague, mutual colleague, P. Horsley of Animal Thoughts. And Linda had asked P 6 questions about IIC. And instead of P answering them, she asked her cat, Texas, who's in spirit, to answer these questions. And I'd like to leave these questions with our audience to think about what's possible with IIC before we wrap up with our exciting announcement. So here are the 6 questions that Linda posed to P, who posed to Texas. And this is true IIC advocacy for and with nature. If our governing authorities were humble enough to practice intuitive interspecies communication, how would that change policy making? 2, if our police force were experts at IIC, how would that change law enforcement? 3, if our teachers and educational systems were experts in IIC, how would that change our education system? 4, if our doctors were familiar with IIC, how would that change our health and medical care systems? 5, not to mention, if veterinarians were familiar with IIC, and some of them are also professional communicators, how would that change their treatment of animals? And the last question that was asked, finally, if every human household consulted with professional accredited animal communicators or IIC professionals, how would that change family lives? So I hope today that I've given you a sense of the rights of nature, the rights of other animals, the right in healthcare, in sanctuaries. There are so many places in the world that IIC can intersect, enhance, and enrich traditional advocacy to include the primary stakeholder.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine. It's such, important thoughts for people to ponder upon, very much so.
And now I think we have just enough time to share some exciting news with everyone of something that is in development, very embryonic, that came about as a result of Winter and I preparing for today. So Winter has been very interested in a council of all beings. And as she spoke about it was sort of, we were ping-ponging off of each other, and nature was, part of the conversation. And basically, what came out of it was a council for and with nature called Nature's Council. Did you want to speak into Nature's Council a bit, Winter?
I think just briefly, because it is so embryonic. So it's come to me in a couple of different forums that I've been working with, and this is a forum for the workshop that I attended in South Africa with Cormac Cullinan, the Wild Law Institute, and everyone is talking. It was the harmonious coexistence workshop. How can we all live harmoniously? And then there was the Wild Animal Protection Forum of South Africa. How can we bring nature's voice into the legal, forum? How can we have how can we have a council of all beings? And it was fascinating because everybody wants it, and everyone, even in our chat, I think it was the first on Monday evening's chat, someone said a interspecies peace conference where nature is represented, a council of nature. And so when Christine and I were chatting, Christine, your ideas just come out of the blue like this, and then we have to run with it or not. It's one of those. They just blast, and then we think, oh, do we run with it or don't we? And we decided to run with it, and we are forming Nature's Council. So we've only had one meeting with, we've invited some core experts in various different fields, but mainly IIC, to get together to start forming this Nature's Council. So it'll be an official body. And we didn't, it was too premature to have a website ready and everything else, but we wanted to announce it here on Humanity Rising, to let people know, if you want to support us, if you have any ideas, if you want to be involved, just perhaps ping Christine if you want to share how people can contact us in the chat, then that would be great. Just wanted to announce it so that people know that it is happening, and we will keep everyone informed as it develops.
I just want to acknowledge some comments in the chat that the Council of All Beings, as Richard shares, was originated by John Seed and Joanna Macy.
Yes.
And it's the principles of deep ecology, and you can Google deep ecology. And the Council of All Being is a ritual for rainforest activists. And what we were guided by nature is to have IIC advocacy and to have Nature's Council. So really anybody could consult with Nature's Council, whether it's a corporation, an NGO, but there are a lot of questions that we have. And like nature, because we're part of nature, we're allowing this to develop organically. And as Winter said, it's premature, so we're just organizing our thoughts. And what nature said to us is, don't make it too complicated, because humans have a tendency to complicate things. So as Winter said, if you're interested in more, you can follow us both, but if you have specific questions or you have a contribution, you can contact me directly. But at the moment, we don't have a landing page or website, but it is coming. It is coming.
And of course, we did the research, and the Council of All Beings is so well known, and it springs from that in a way, and expanding it even in a different way to a modern way based on Indigenous ways of communicating and receiving Nature's Council.
And I think the last thing that I'd like to share, because I know Jim will be joining us soon, is that IIC advocacy for and with nature, a call to action. I'm asking today for people to, and people are, and thank you if you are, or you can re-examine it, to take responsibility and co-create the new earth through IIC. It's time for this paradigm to be integrated everywhere. It's time for humans to stop acting independently on behalf of others and to communicate, collaborate, and co-create with nature. So how can you do this individually? How can you do this collectively? It might be taking Winter's courses and learning about IIC, and then completing, postgraduate studies. It might be joining the Heart Pride, which is in support of the Global White Lion Protection Trust. It might be, organizing something in your neighborhood, following your inner wisdom. It might be joining a larger group. It might be offering support to Nature's Council. There's an unlimited number of ways. And again, you're not alone. Nature supports you, and you can receive confirmation and guidance from nature through this process, like any other aspect in your life. I've just got one last story that's come to mind. The last virtual Star Lion journey that Winter guided us into the White Lion Protection Trust was actually last week. So I was up in the middle of the night because it was held in real time in South Africa, which is 6 hours ahead. So I was up at midnight. And we would go on these lion checks, and we would speak to, nature and the Bushveld and all of her beings. And not only are we heart-storming with nature, not only are we communicating with nature of what needs to be done and how we can do it, I think the thing that people forget is that there's so much love from nature and other animals that supports us individually as beings. And so if we're in a situation that we don't know how to resolve or seeking guidance, we too receive this guidance. So for me, it's so nourishing to contribute, to be in service of nature, to be with other like-minded and open-hearted people. But it's also incredibly fulfilling to receive messages directly from nature that I'm on track, that this is exactly where I'm meant to be, or whatever. And all the other people that had questions and intentions received the guidance that they needed.
Perfect. Perfect. Thank you, Christine. Thank you so much for all those words of encouragement and sharing what is out there and all the possibilities. Well done. Thank you. On that note, Jim, are you sitting? You wonderful. Thank you.
Yep, right here. Well, thank you, Christine, very, very much. It's very inspiring to hear your ceaseless dynamism across a variety of fronts.
And I think that dovetails into Jane Goodall's message of hope. There is hope everywhere we look.
Yeah, the audacity of hope. Let me just start with this council. Now, I'd like to just hear more about your thinking. I know it's very nascent and so forth, but as you contemplate it, how are you envisioning the participation of other species? And how do you see the human interspecies council kind of getting formulated? Because if you could pull that off, that would be unprecedented. How are you thinking about that?
Who's going to start, Winter? Well, first of all,
go ahead.
I have no doubt that it will unfold because we have received this guidance from nature, and that's what we do. And we're in service to nature. And it's simply the humans trying to figure out some practical details that is. So I just made some notes because there was just some preliminary discussions, as you said. So as Winter mentioned, we have a core group of people starting this, and not only the people, but we are speaking and communicating with nature. And so our first meeting was simply a planning meeting. And the initial thoughts, which are subject to change, because this is in development and unfolding organically, as I mentioned, is that we would meet on a regular basis. Nature's Council would meet to receive, what is it, Winter? You have that beautiful play on words. Receive.
Well, humans would be receiving counsel from nature, from nature's council.
Yeah. So receiving counsel, nature's council would receive counsel, but it's, spelled differently. And it's just kind of fun that way. And so it could happen two ways, potentially. One, it would be nature leading the way and bringing messages and information of what it wants humanity to know. The other way it could be accessed is by humans asking to consult with nature, so that it is truly a two-way conversation, because that's what IIC is. There was talk this week about what's the difference between IIC and mediumship and channeling. And IIC is an actual conversation, is a back and forth. So it would be about how to care for nature and sound ethical advice for people seeking it. Do you want to add anything, Winter?
Yeah, because I see it as really a platform that people are aware that is there, that they can go to the council, Nature's Council, if they are working on a specific conservation project or, animal protection project, and they need some help moving forward. So, in some of the work that I do with
interspecies consulting. service.
Exactly. So if someone's really
That's
battling,
very
because
cool. An interspecies
yeah,
consulting service.
Yeah.
that's exactly. So it would be a service that we offer, not just not just a website where people can go and look for advice, but actually a service that we offer.
Yeah,
If you,
yeah.
that's how I envisage it from the beginning. It might, I'm sure, it can morph into so many different things, but that's the core thing, is to really assist people who are doing work for nature, in service of nature, to receive guidance from that particular species or being that they are working with. And
Mhm,
we can be the translators,
Facilitators.
mhm.
facilitators.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Winter and I, in another conversation preparing for today, because I have been so excited about this partnership, and everybody presenting this week are all my colleagues, and I know them, and I want to show up and support and go to the after chat, is that, as Winter mentioned in our talk earlier, on day one, there was so many calls for an interspecies conference, there, and we noticed that. And that may be something that we bring to Nature's Council, to ask nature, what does nature think of this? What would it look like? What would nature like to see?
Mhm, mhm, mhm.
So, there is this co-creation always happening. We are co-creating um, Nature's Council by preparing for today. And then on Monday, in the talk came up, what about an interspecies peace conference? And that's going to circle back. So it goes full circle.
Right. Of course, then it would raise the question of which of the millions of species that are out there would you consult on this? But do you go to the elephants? Do you go to the white lions? Do you go to the chimpanzees? Do you go to your pet dog? It's going to be a delicious series of options and opportunities. But I think the conceptual breakthrough here, again, that we humans are not going to solve this. That's just obvious. So that what the two of you are proposing, among others, is really a breakthrough. Okay, let's start consulting outside ourselves for the questions that normally we would ask and answer ourselves. That's the basic conceptual breakthrough,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And to answer your question, Jim, there are millions of species and beings, but they step forward. We don't, we just ask, we invite them. And the other thing that I've been thinking all week and listening to the speakers, because we've been talking about speaking to individual beings and invisible realms and inner and outer landscapes, is that we can speak to species and beings collectively, to the oversoul of horses, to the oversoul of plants, to the divas. So there are many different ways where it may sound impossible, like so much information coming in, but it is simplified in a way that we can easily receive and understand.
Mm, mm, mm. Yeah, yeah, that's the point that you've been making, Winter, that nature is proactively compassionate. You know, all we have to do is indicate some level of receptivity, and nature will figure out which amongst them will communicate what and in what order. That's a very profound
Definitely.
point, Christina. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank
And
you.
I think why this hasn't, you know, something like this, when it's proposed, I remember standing up in these meetings and workshops saying, but we can consult with nature. We can, this is the work I've been doing for the last 20 years. And people will say, thinking about it in a logical way, just like you said, but who would we talk to? Which elephant and where do we talk to about this problem? And which, there's so many ants, and, it was just inconceivable. But when we, as Christine says, when we work with it and with this knowledge, it simplifies it down. That's fascinating. I can't wait to see where it goes.
Yeah. And Jim, you mentioned, like, do we speak to our dogs or our cats? And I think that's an important point of that our animal family members are on the front line with humanity, and that many of us have a deeper understanding of IIC without knowing it or calling it IIC, because we've had experience of communication with the animal family members that live with us. And we may dismiss it as observation, but we don't share a common spoken language. And the reality is that almost every animal lover that I've met who has lived or worked with an animal or nature has had an experience of IIC. And so to broaden it to speak to all of nature is not inconceivable, because they know this to be a truth. It resonates deeply within them.
Yeah. Beautiful. 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 Well, listen, I think we'll bring this to a close for today. And maybe, Christine, you can offer some final words that come to your heart. And then Winter, you can offer some final words after teeing us up for our final program tomorrow.
So I've noticed that there are a tremendous number of questions in the chat of what did Texas the cat answer to Linda's questions. So rather than finishing with my last thoughts, I would like to satisfy the curiosity of people and honor Texas by bringing through his wisdom. So I'm just going to summarize this briefly. So if governing authorities used IIC, how would it affect policymaking? And I need to find my glasses, which I'm not sure they went, so I will make do. They would look to source for all their answers, for solutions to empower, and they would find answers that bring community and cohesion. The answers would all be available in nature to bring peace and comfort through heart consciousness. If police used IIC, Texas says, we are together as one for a short period of time. There would be more compassion if policing forces used IIC. There would be more organizations working to empower and support policing services. There would be a recognition that all beings are equal, and that we would learn by watching other animals and their example. With regards to teachers and education systems, education would be more free-flowing and sensory. There would be many more ways to learn, particularly outdoors. And IIC would be incorporated within schools. And all learning styles would be acknowledged and recognized. And happiness would become the norm. If doctors integrated IIC, patients would be put first, not profits. Health would no longer be monetized. The buildings that provide healthcare would change in shape and location, and the views would be exclusively of nature. If veterinarians used IIC, they would be able to communicate with their animal patients how they're feeling and what they need, and they could work together in partnership. Their intelligence and wisdom would be recognized as the patient. And lastly, if IIC was in every family household, whatever the family looks like, communication fosters communication. Respect breeds respect. Understanding breeds understanding. Once you begin IIC, your life is transformed. Your heart opens, heals, and grows for the greater service, for the greater good in service of the planet. Thank you, Texas, for your wisdom.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. And I think we really do have to bring P and Texas in here, because P was actually going to be one of my guest speakers as well, but she got called to jury duty. So we can share P. Horsley. Her website is animalthoughts.com, and Texas is her guide. And I know she's been on Humanity Rising.
Been on before, yeah.
Yeah.
And she's also
Wonderful.
the in response to what nature asked, she created the Conversations with Nature World Summit,
Yes.
which is online, which has over 15,000 people attend annually when she hosts it.
Mhm. So to learn more about P in Texas, you can go on her website. And just a note about tomorrow. Well, first I want to just thank you, Christine, as well, and thank you, Jim, and thank you everyone who's supporting this work. It's so heartwarming to see this and feel this, because that's what it's all about. Tomorrow, Eleni Gekakis from Greece is going to be joining us, and she's going to be talking about communicating with the elements, and specifically with fire and wind. And she has some fascinating experiences to share. And yeah, so don't miss that one. If you can make it, make sure you can live. And she will, I'm no doubt she's watching now, and she may well be in the after chat as well, I think, with Christine.
And I just want to thank Winter for honoring your sacred activism, and for the invitation to speak today about what is precious in my heart, IIC Advocacy for and with nature, and to Jim and Ubiquity University for giving IIC a platform with Animal Talk Africa and bringing it to the forefront, because nature holds the answers that humanity needs at this time. And when we're unconscious, we don't give nature and animals enough credit. As we wake up, we come to realize how young our human consciousness is.
Totally. Totally. Beautiful final words, both of you. Thank you so much. This has been another brilliant session, Winter, Christine. So thank you. And that'll bring us to a close for today, everyone. You can join Christine and Winter in the after chat. You'll see the link in the chat box, or you received it in your Zoom invite as the reminder for today. And then tomorrow, we'll have our fifth and final session on intuitive interspecies communication. Thank you, Winter. Thank you, Christine. Thanks,
Thank you.
Bye for now.
Thank you, everyone.